In Ronald Reagan's America, we don't negotiate with terrorists. We sell weapons to them and use the money from those illegal weapon sales to fund other terrorists illegally. And that is just one more reason everybody hates Reagan. You see, the guy who was never a cowboy but played one on TV really liked to live out that persona as president. And a big part of his campaign was that big tough America would never negotiate with terrorists. A promise he kept for approximately 0 years in office. See, when Ronald Reagan got elected, we weren't on the best terms with Iran. The Iran hostage crisis situation that Reagan actively sabotaged to help him get elected was just being resolved. And the United States had embargoed arms sales to Iran, partially in response to that, and partially because Iran was a state sponsor of terrorism, and the United States thought that that was bad, okay? Unless, of course, those terrorists were doing stuff that we approved of, like the Contras trying to overthrow the government in Nicaragua because, communism or some shit. Yeah, that's right, the Contras from the Iran-Contra affair is a guerrilla terror group from South America, and Iran is not from South America. So how did Ronald Reagan and the United States manage to tie together a Middle Eastern country and a South American terror group? Well, I'm glad you asked. The year is 1981. We just elected a shitty B-list actor as president. The Cold War is still kind of a big deal. And we now hate Iran, who is at war with Iraq. And we also hate communism, 'cause America. And nobody hates communism quite like Ronald Reagan. And to understand what relevance that has and why that matters, we need to go to Nicaragua, 1979. The Sandinista National Liberation Front had a revolution and overthrew the dynasty that had been ruling the place. And then after Viva la Revolution, they're like, hey, why don't we just give everybody health care and teach them to read and shit? And teaching people to read and letting them go to the doctors is fucking communist, obviously. And Ronald Reagan was absolutely not about literacy and letting people go to the doctor. So the CIA, whose favorite pastime is destabilizing foreign countries for no apparent fucking reason, starts training and funding the counter-revolution, Contra, to overthrow the rebels who had just overthrown the Nicaraguan government. Now, for clarity's sake, this did start in 79, so a little bit before Reagan, but Reagan really, really loved the Contras. The motherfucker said the Contras were the moral equivalent to our founding fathers, which, you know, they did commit a lot of atrocities and human rights violations, so I guess maybe he's kind of got a point there. Anyway, a lot of people didn't like the Contras, and the fact that we were giving them all of this money so they could go do the terrorisms. So between 82 and 84, Congress passed the Boland Amendment, which made it illegal for Ronald Reagan to keep giving the fuckers money. And Reagan is like, fuck democracy, we're gonna do whatever we need to do to keep the Contras together, body and soul. Minus the fuck democracy part of that quote, that is an actual quote, he said. Also in 1984, the Nicaraguans had an election and elected the Sandinistas to be their government. And in the name of democracy, Ronald Reagan continued to support a far-right extremist group in their attempts to overthrow a democratically elected government in another country. Anyway, back to the story. And back to the Middle East. Iranian-backed terrorists had taken 7 Americans hostage. It's just kind of their thing. So in light of this, Robert McFarlane, Ronnie's national security advisor, goes to Ronnie and he's like, I've got an idea that's so fucking stupid you could have come up with it yourself. In retaliation for the Iranians taking Americans hostage, let's give them missiles and shit. You know, not like how we normally give countries missiles, you know, like from an airplane and it ends in an explosion. Let's give them stuff that they can use to fight Iraq. Maybe they'll be so happy that we were nice and sold them weapons that maybe they'll just give us some of our hostages back for being nice guys. And Ronnie's like, I fucking like the way you think, Rob. So Ronnie, clearly thinking that this is a foolproof plan, has Robert pitch it to get approval for it. So Robert writes this report. He's like, all right, guys, I know we've got this embargo on Iran, so we can't sell them weapons, but hear me out. What if we sell them weapons? Because, hear me out, if we don't sell them weapons, then they could maybe possibly buy weapons from the Russians, and then they'd be friends with the Russians, and that'd be bad. So we should sell it to them, and then we might possibly get hostages back too, which would be a nice bonus. And the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, looked at this report and wrote on it in pen that it was too absurd to comment on. Needless to say, they didn't get congressional approval to sell weapons to Iran. So Ronnie and Robert go back to the drawing board and they're like, all right, how about instead of selling weapons to Iran, we sell weapons to Iran illegally. That's what they did. They come up with this big elaborate plan where Israel is going to sell the weapons to Iran and then give us the money, and then we were going to give Israel their weapons back. So anyway, McFarlane steps down from his position in 1985 to spend more time with the kids, I guess. And he's replaced with Admiral Poindexter, and Poindexter's Colonel Oliver North starts handling all of these operations. Yeah, that Ollie North, the idiot that runs the NRA now. Same dude. So Reagan comes up with this brilliant fucking idea. I'm gonna give Ollie North, this fucking idiot colonel who has no experience or qualifications in this matter, complete authority to make all of the decisions in this illegal thing that we're doing. Ollie was excited for the opportunity. And Ollie's like, fuck this whole going through Israel thing. We're just gonna sell them all the weapons directly. That way we get to keep all the money. Then we're gonna put a $15 million markup on the weapons, and then we can give that money to that terror group in Nicaragua. Fucking man with a plan. A plan that did not include making the release of the hostages a mandatory condition of this illegal weapon sale, but they did make it like a request. So they sell Iran some weapons, they get some money, Iran releases 3 hostages, and then immediately turns around and kidnaps 3 more hostages. But we continued selling them weapons multiple times for over a year. I think it was like 1,500 missiles in total. So anyway, yeah, that was fun. And then an Iranian official leaked the story to a Lebanese reporter who published it, and then the world knew about it, and Ronald Reagan was like, no, we didn't negotiate with terrorists. I mean, we did it to get the hostages back, but it wasn't like a weapons for hostages trade. We were just doing this to improve our relations with Iran by giving them weapons, and then they gave us some hostages once in a while. But it wasn't weapons for hostages, and we didn't negotiate very, very well. They're like, hey, wait a minute. Iran said they paid y'all $30 million for these weapons that you illegally sold them, and there's only 12 million reported here. Where'd the rest go? And Ronnie's like, my God, would you look at the time? I'd love to stay and answer some more questions, but I got a thing I gotta go to. President, very busy, important person. I'm sure you understand. We'll chat later. Meanwhile, Ollie North is frantically trying to get his shredder unjammed as he's shoving Encyclopedia Britannica volumes worth of classified documents through it. Anyway, all of this stuff, there was a lot of crimes committed doing this. All of it was crimes. It was all crime. Ronald Reagan's administration is one of the most corrupt in history, and this was a big part of that. So Ronnie appoints the Tower Commission to investigate himself and find that he did nothing wrong. It was just a couple senators he handpicked to investigate everything and put out a report, and they determined from their thorough investigation that Ronnie had no idea what was going on. But all of this stuff you clearly wanted to have happen obviously happened without your knowledge or input. Gosh shucks, golly gee, Ronnie, you should probably pay more attention to these things next time. But a bunch of other people get indicted and convicted of numerous crimes. Ollie North gets indicted but gets off on some like Fifth Amendment technicality. Then Daddy Bush gets elected and he's like, I had no idea what was going on in this situation. I was kept completely in the dark and out of the loop. But pardons for everybody. Just pardons all around if you were involved in this whole thing. But it turns out Daddy Bush was a grown-ass man who kept a diary. And in 1993, a November 5th, 1986 excerpt was released by the White House from said diary, where Daddy Bush was like, "Dear diary, the news just keeps talking about the hostages and the whole situation with Iran, and everybody just thinks that like I'm out of the loop and I don't know what's going on, but I'm a special big little boy with special vice president powers, and I know everything that's going on. I'm one of the only people who knows all the details, and it makes me sad when people call me a useful idiot who's incompetent and just kept out of the loop, because I can do criminal things too." I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he did legit write in his big boy diary that he was one of the only people who knew all of the details about what was going on. Needless to say, he faced no repercussions either. And the fact that one of the most corrupt administrations in U.S. history illegally sold arms to terrorists and our enemies in the Middle East so they could illegally fund a totally different terrorist group in South America trying to overthrow a government, all which failed at accomplishing anything but giving our enemies and terrorists weapons and money, and destabilizing entire regions and creating really fucked up foreign relations that still haunt us today, is just one more reason everybody hates Reagan.